But first, some of the Liberal Party's biggest donors are threatening to pull their funding after the devastating loss on the weekend. Donors are long-term supporters of the Liberal Party have lashed out at the disorganised election campaign and at Peter Dutton's Labor-light small target policy platform, saying that after that performance, they're no longer interested in giving the Libs financial support. Billionaire Robert Milner, the chairman of Soul Patts, said, "It's been a disaster. I will be seriously thinking about whether I ever donate again. I don't know where they go to from now. It was a very poor campaign." Stockbroker Angus Aitken, one of the largest Liberal donors, said, "I have zero interest in donating further to the Liberals. They need a wholesale clear out to work out what they stand for instead of these Me Too-style quasi-Labor policies. To do not well against these poor outcomes Labor has generated is astounding, but the lack of policies from the Liberal Party was completely hopeless." Also among the criticism was that the coalition failed to effectively campaign on cutting Labor's wasteful green energy spending and on stopping Labor's dangerous plans for unrealised capital gains tax. Joining me now for more on this is News Corp senior writer Patrick Carlyon. Patrick, this is precisely the advice they should be listening to instead of the media hacks telling them to veer further left. They ran a Labor-like policy. It didn't work. It doesn't work in WA, it doesn't work here in Victoria, and it certainly doesn't work federally, as we've just seen.
Well, it was uniform, wasn't it? Australia rejected the coalition. It wasn't Victoria, say, or Queensland. And I think those donors make a very good point. We're coming off a first-term government that wasn't particularly good. Anthony Albanese's never going to be Bob Hawke. There was a lot of errors made through that term. There was plenty to prosecute, and they just could not effectively sort of launch a campaign that made you think, well, here's a vision here that's different to the Labor Party that's been in power and made a lot of mistakes. It was fragmented. It was, we're hearing now it was so chaotic behind the scenes. It was all on-the-run policy, and nobody bought it.
Now, Patrick, you mentioned chaos, and here is further details of the chaos within the Liberal Party in the lead-up to the election, with insiders revealing that major energy, housing and defence policies were worked up on the run during the campaign, and it showed. The National Gas Reserve policy, senior coalition ministers were only given about 3 hours' notice that Peter Dutton planned to unveil the gas policy, and the announcement was made before the final version of the modelling from Frontier Economics was available. That reportedly saw Liberal campaign staff chasing the final version of the report from Director Danny Price, who was found to be in New Zealand with his phone turned off. Patrick, when the report was finally made public, some 12 days after Peter Dutton's budget speech, it didn't exactly show the cost savings that were promised. I mean, this is such a monumental mess. When they needed to be bold and strong, they were weak and incoherent.
Look, I think that's right. I mean, if you go back to last year or even the year before, Peter Dutton announced a nuclear policy, which you sort of thought, well, that's whatever you think of it, that's bold, that's game-changing. Are we going to have a referendum on energy? And instead we get these sort of half-baked sort of ideas on the run, and the modelling didn't even pan out to accord with what Peter Dutton had promised. You can't be doing that. This election was not a surprise. They've had 3 years to sort of work on this and to get it right and to believe in things and to convince the electorate that this is a bold alternative. And they failed on all of those levels.
We had Senator Alex Antic on Sunday on Outsiders, and he said that some of their policies resembled mobile phone plans, where you get a special deal for 12 months. You get a cut or discount on the fuel excise. But how is that going to convince people to throw out a first-term government? And you mentioned nuclear policy. It was a point of differentiation, but it doesn't come until the 2030s if they won. And they ran away from that policy throughout the campaign. They were too scared to articulate their position because there were attacks which they should have expected. Of course there were going to be attacks.
Well, I think unconvincing is the word that sort of springs to mind for me, because in the end, when they looked to be in doubt, they sort of copied what the ALP had done or did a version of the ALP. And at the same time, they sort of alienated certain sections of the community. They weren't a choice. They weren't doing anything different and they weren't doing anything better. It looked like a campaign where they really were doing it on the run and they really didn't know what they were striving to do.
Now, to an interesting piece in the Australian Financial Review by Tricia Jar on the woes facing the Liberal Party, she writes about the error of thinking that to appeal to women, to appeal to professionals and millennials, the Liberals must change or compromise their values. She writes, tax policies that encourage growth, housing policies that enable choice, immigration policies that contribute to Australia's prosperity, and a disciplined approach to public spending that contains ballooning debt for the next generation should be bread and butter issues for Liberals, and one that can have cut through with all demographics. She makes an excellent point there because I think the easy thing to do, which is what we're hearing now from all the grifters and the like, is they are wanting to push through their pet projects. So they want to have gender quotas. They want to essentially turn the Liberal Party into Labor.
Yes.
We already have a Labor Party. If people want to vote for Labor, they vote for Labor. Give them a choice. But the point made in this AFR piece, I think, is spot on. Women and millennials, they're not some weird demographic. If you give them sound policies, it will appeal to them as it appeals to every other demographic.
Well, it was women in those marginal seats, in the outer suburbs of the capital cities that they really had to win over. And they sort of lost them from day one virtually, or literally, with their working from home policy, which basically said a lot of these women were working from home to save money because they're in a cost of living crisis. They were making ends meet. And to sort of come in and basically have this policy that alienates them from the outset, that's when the election was lost, basically. And it's easy to say that after the event. But they never got that back. And it was the same with young people and indeed for all taxpayers. I mean, the Coalition's tax policy was costlier to the average taxpayer than the ALP's. I mean, what do they believe in? What do they stand for?
Well, we'll wait and see because I think it's going to be crucial, the next leader of the Liberal Party. If they go the wrong way with that, then they can have many more years of pain. The rebuild needs to start and needs to start very quickly. Patrick Carlyon, thanks for your time.